for his public service. Stephen O'Brien is one of 6 people in the city who received the annual Sloan Public Service Award from the Fund for the City of New York. The group calls it the Nobel Prizes of city government. O'Brien works with the DOE's Office of School Food in Long Island City. He's credited with bringing in healthier meal options and getting rid of styrofoam waste.
It is a wonderful thing to focus on those people who are truly dedicated, who go above and beyond, not just for a day, but year after year.
This award really exemplifies all of the hard work that the 8,000 employees who serve our children every day put into their job day in and day out.
Each winner receives a cash prize of $10,000.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming to the Food Policy for Breakfast Seminar Series. I want to welcome you all to Hunter College and here to East Harlem. My name is Charles Plotkin, and I am the director of the New York City Food Policy Center here at Hunter College, and also a professor of nutrition. And today we're privileged to have 3 members of the New York City School Foods. Stephen O'Brien, who you just saw, who won that prestigious award. I'm sure he's thrilled that I played that for all of you. And Simone Martin, who is the Director of Recruiting, and Georgia Angelakis, who is Manhattan District 3 Supervisor. I want to give them a warm welcome. And I want to invite Stephen up, who's going to give us a brief overview of school foods, and then we'll start our panel discussion. I also want to quickly, and I wrote this down, so give me 1 second. I want to thank, we have a group from CMS P327 in the House, and they're working on a special project along with New Settlement Apartments and CUP. So I want to thank you guys for coming along, and I think you'll find this group excellent and exciting to listen to, and you'll learn a lot. Without further, let's welcome Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, that was slightly embarrassing, but it's really my honor to be here. I see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new faces, which is really great. As you heard in that little clip, you know, there's a lot of people that do this work day in and day out. There's about 8,000 employees that work for School Food, and we are the largest school food program in the United States. A lot of people like to say that we're the 2nd largest institution when it comes to food buying, after the military. So you can imagine that our scale and our size create a lot of challenges for us, but also a lot of opportunities. And today I'm hoping that you'll get a little bit of an overview of how we work, a little peek behind the curtain, and then I know we'll have a panel with plenty of opportunity for discussion. Okay? So we currently are producing 31 menus. We have about 300 recipes for foods that we're offering. There's about 1,900, almost 2,000 schools in New York City's system. There's 1.1 million students, and we serve about 165 million meals a day. That translates to about 930,000 meals per day. So it's quite large, but like I said, exciting. Acceptability, nutrition standards, and cost are really the pillars of how we build our menus. So we're going to talk a little bit about this because this is the backbone of any food service operation, is their menu. And so when we look at our menu, we're looking at what the students really want to have for lunch. And we have to balance between maybe our own personal culinary perspective when it comes to planning menus, maybe our own personal nutrition goals that we may have that have come down in the form of regulations from the federal and from the city government. And we have to make sure that, number one, it's something that students are going to eat. We don't want to be presenting food that is so foreign or so unapproachable that students aren't going to come to the line and get the full benefit of the meal that we're serving. So stay with that kind of theme as we go through this presentation. So acceptability is number one. We are student-driven, so students are coming to our headquarters office for the past couple of years, and they are the ones evaluating the products and the recipes that we're serving on our menus. So all of the items are really student-approved, which means that we have about 2,000 students coming to our headquarters office as a field trip. Any school is welcome to join us. We schedule it out about a month and a half in advance, and we bring in one class at a time to go through a whole field trip where we describe food service careers, what the palate is, how to taste foods, and go through an actual food taste testing of about 5 to 6 items. The nutrition standards we'll go into in a little bit more depth, but just at this point, we have to realize that after we have a menu that we know is acceptable and that sort of is a good culinary menu and it's just seems to be a good combination of colors and texture and flavors and all the basics of menu planning, then we have to put it through the filter of nutrition standards. And we need to make sure that it's meeting, for example, at lunch, 600 to 650 calories for lunch. We need to make sure that the fat is below 10% for saturated fats. We need to make sure that the sodium is low. We need to make sure that the overall balance of the meal is in place, that all of the different food groups are represented, and even subgroups when it comes to vegetables. So all those have to be sort of reviewed. And then finally, we are run by taxpayers' dollars, right? Everyone in this room funds the school meals program through our taxes. And so as a result, we need to make sure that we're good spenders of that money. We need to make sure that we're being efficient, that we're being responsible, and that we're planning towards a target each month to make sure that we're not wasteful when it comes to the dollars that are available for this program to run successfully. So currently, our food cost is about $1.30 per meal. So how many of you have bought a pack of gum for less than $1.30 in the past week? Okay, it's extremely challenging to actually do. We do a lot of good things because we're so large, we can buy very efficiently, but we do pay a premium when it comes to the logistics of delivering that food during the school day in New York City. So I like to sort of say that we're sort of paying for FedEx overnight compared to ground transportation. And so as a result, the overall cost that we have to look at when we're looking at the food cost, what did it cost to get that case of food to the kitchen, right, actually becomes quite high. This gives you a sense of the student evaluation process. This is the agenda that we use when the students come to visit us. So we go through an overview of school food, we explain the taste testing process, we talk a little bit about careers, we review the menus with those students while they're visiting us, we make sure that they're giving us feedback on the current menu at their school, and then we go through feeding them lunch. Of course, we want to make sure that they have a healthy and nutritious lunch while they're visiting us for the day, and then they head back to their school in the afternoon. The overall field trip's about 4 hours. This gives you a very high-level, simplified version of the type of standards that we have to meet. So you can see on the left there's breakfast and there's lunch, there's calorie limits, there's sodium limits, total fat isn't evaluated from the federal government, but it's still evaluated from New York City. So New York City has another layer of standards that we have to meet when we're serving students in our schools. We have saturated fat that we're looking at, trans fat, and sugar, as well as fiber. And you can see they're not the same standards. So you might go through the process of reviewing all of the federal standards first, and then you'll put it through all of the city standards. And currently, we're actually not meeting all of the sodium standards for the city. We're close, but we're not quite meeting them. And the purpose of that was really that the city was trying to be very aggressive in meeting the 2022 targets that the USDA set out. So we're well ahead of the overall federal schedule for sodium reduction, but we're not necessarily meeting it on every single product for the city standard. So if you were to look at the New York City stats website, you would see that that's the only area of non-compliance for New York City schools, to be completely honest. But still far ahead of most school districts when it comes to sodium reduction. This gives you a sense of some things that we're doing, making sure that we're exceeding basically some of these standards. We work to have prohibited ingredients. We make sure that we're transitioning to antibiotic-free meats. So currently we have antibiotic-free chicken, which is really a World Health concern, making sure that all of the antibiotics continue to work for humans and for animals. So we don't want to have overuse of antibiotics because otherwise they will, lose their effectiveness. We want to make sure that our ingredients are clean as possible. We want to continue to reduce sodium. We want to continue to reduce fat. And we want to make sure that we're using technology to support all of the evaluations that we're doing in making sure that we have local foods, that we have 2 grams of fiber in all of our bread items at a minimum, that we're serving a variety of items on our salad bars. We're using compostable and biodegradable plates. Fresh fruits are offered daily, and we have been continuing to roll out additional refrigerated water jets, which is refrigerated tap water, in our schools so that students have the access to a nice cold glass of water. This gives you a sense of the prohibited ingredients. All this information also is available on our website if you were to look at school food www.schoolfoodnyc.org. You would see all of this is there as well. But this gives you a sense. New York City was always a pioneer in basically keeping the ingredients very clean. Since the 70s, really, artificial colors and artificial flavors were not allowed in New York City school food. So that's not a new thing. That's been the case for a long, long time. Because it was proven that when it came to artificial color specifically, in studies done at that time, that it prevented cognitive development, or it might have hindered cognitive development in young students. So as a result, we want to make sure that we're not doing anything that's going to contribute to students not performing to their highest potential. And food has a direct correlation to that, and we know that, and we've known it for a long time. So when you go down the list, you'll see there's many other ingredients that are listed here. Some of them are proven in science, and some of them are basically public opinion. So when you look at something like, and I know there's a cross-section of sort of nutritionists and food service professionals and educators in the room, so not that I want to get into a debate about this, but when you talk about high fructose corn syrup as an example, right, there's a debate about how your body processes that as a sugar. And so, is it proven in science that it's really bad for you? It might be a little bit murky, a little gray, depending on who the audience is and what information you're looking at. But when you are the person who's responsible for running the largest school system in the United States, you can make a statement by putting this on the banned ingredient list, and you can sort of say, we're erring on the side of caution, and we're also responding to the public's opinion in New York City, our community that we're serving, asking for us to take it out. So sometimes it's on public opinion and sometimes it's on science. And we build this list in combination with support from the Department of Health. So we don't do this just in isolation because it's an emotional decision. We do this because we're trying to base it on reality, whether it's the reality of perception or the reality of science. Okay? But we're very happy about this list. It's very, I think, aggressive compared to most school districts. And I think we do quite a good job of enforcing this and making sure that this is met in all of our products. We have inspectors that go to schools on a daily basis that are looking for performance against the specification, and they make sure that the ingredients that are in our food are not prohibited ingredients. The menu development, basically I want to just spend a little bit of time on this because I think it's important to understand how we build our menus. So we'll look at the menu development input. We'll make sure that we're getting the information from the students, from all those menu exercises during the field trips. We have a School Food app, so if you have an Android or an iPhone, you can log in and you can do School Food NYC, and you can get an app that will have all of the menus on them, as well as surveys that are student-driven. So we ask for students to participate. Currently we have 10,000 students giving us feedback on a daily basis. So that's very good, and it's only about 1.5 years old. But we want more students to connect with us so that we're really connecting to the customers. And they'll give us all kinds of input on the performance of products, on the things they like and don't like, and that helps drive our planning process. Once we basically come up with a menu, we have a good number of chefs that work in our central office in our menu planning department, Culinary Institute of America graduates as myself from Johnson & Wales University, New York City Technical College, and many other universities come to work for us, and they're students that have a great culinary background, very rich in the aspect of how food should be presented and served to students. And so we'll work through that. Once we have a nice menu that we think is great, we're going to run it through the nutritional requirements, then we're going to run it through the whole year. We're going to basically plan the menu from September through June so that we can consider what does the menu look like that first Monday after the holiday recess when schools have been closed for 8 days. Do you think you're going to have a lot of fresh produce on that first day? Anybody? No, right? Typically not. So you're going to adjust your menu to make sure that you're offering items that might be frozen or they might be canned just for those first couple days as we're getting fresh product in stores back into the school. So we want to build out the whole year just for planning purposes and just for conceptually making sure that we're doing things well. But you don't see us post our menus for the whole year because things change along the way. So we post our menus basically 2 months in advance on our website. Then we do the cost analysis. And each time that we're going through each of these filters, we might have to go back to the previous, right? So we might say, okay, well, it's not meeting the needs for after the holiday recess, so let's go back and redraw the menu and think about it a little differently. As we go through the cost analysis, we might find that it's way too expensive. It's costing $1.80. We can't afford it. What can we do to adjust the frequency of the items? Which means that we'll go through the frequency, meaning how many times are we serving the more expensive items versus how many times are we serving the less expensive items. So the blended cost is what we're looking at. We're not looking at each individual day. in any of this. We're not looking at it from the nutritional in an individual day, and we're not looking at it from the cost. We're looking at the blended weekly cost, or the blended weekly nutritional value, because most of our students participate with us on a daily basis. So the federal government looks at the weekly average. Then we have commodities. So the USDA gives us an allocation of about $30 million out of our $300 million budget. 120 million goes to food, 125 million goes to food. 30 million of that, on top of that, comes from the federal government in the form of commodities. So there's certain categories of food that the federal government looks to stimulate in the American economy. So they may provide us with money that we can spend on particular chicken products, on particular beef products, on particular cheese products. And what we do is we take that 30 million and we look at making sure that we're getting the best value out of the $30 million as possible against the menu. Then we look at the cost of those commodities, because sometimes those commodities actually cost more, the all-in cost of those commodities sometimes costs more than the retail price, because there's just different layers that it needs to go through. So we try not to do that. We try not to spend the money on something that's more expensive through commodity than it is through retail, because then we can use that money towards something that's more efficient. And then we create the final base menu for us to then plan from and work from for the rest of the year. As we go forward, this year we've incorporated updated secondary service lines. We have improved our local procurement through our New York Thursdays initiative. We continue to be sensitive and focused on creating a sustainable food service program in New York. And we are always trying to get the message out there on all the positive things that we do, which is quite difficult when there's no marketing budget allowed for school food. We have to partner with people like you, with organizations like yours, in order to get that word out there. It's a very grassroots sort of movement. The federal reimbursement doesn't allow us to actually market the program. The monies that come from the federal reimbursement are really to be spent on the operating and the food itself, not to be spent on promoting yourselves. So that's a little different than you would get at maybe some of the restaurants in the community, chain restaurants, et cetera, that have the opportunity to have a marketing budget. We don't necessarily have that in a formal way. So this is our updated service line. We have Murrow High School, August Martin, Graphics, NIS 230. These are the first 4 schools out of a group of 20 schools that we were able to get capital funding through a separate budget line in the city to reinvent and reimagine the way that we're serving our meals. And this is basically a pilot program to see how we can present the meals in a more adult manner, especially in our upper grades, junior high and high school, so that students can self-select the items that they would like. It's a little bit more of an interactive approach to the way that we're serving the menu items, and we're seeing great successes, 100% increase in participation, even 150% increase in participation, because it's a little different than coming through a serving line and having the employees serve it to you on a round compostable plate. This is something that is packaged and allowing for students to self-select, as I mentioned. So we're doing this, we're measuring everything involved, we're measuring the waste, we're measuring the cost of the packaging, we're measuring the labor involved with providing this type of service compared to the traditional type of service, and we're studying it. We're doing this in a smart way because this is some of the advantage of being such a large school district. When you're this large, you can peel off 20 schools out of the almost 2,000, and even if it's costing a little more for this pilot, you can be experimentative because in the overall budget, it's like a little blip in the radar, right? It's not impacting you dramatically when you look at it from the whole city. So we like to say that we're very proud of the fact that we can be so innovative in New York City because of our scale. Okay? If we only had 50 schools and half of them went to this model and it cost us twice as much, we wouldn't be able to sustain it. Okay? So just something to think about when you hear about certain pilots or certain initiatives in New York. Local procurement, this gives you a sense of some of the items that we purchase locally. And we continue to add new and more innovative items as manufacturing occurs and more processing is available in New York State. So some people in the room might be very connected to the fact that there isn't a whole lot of fresh cut produce available to New York State customers, that it's either for very high-end restaurants, so it might be coming out of a very specialty type of shop in the distribution stream, or it might be that there's like one apple slice producer in the state. So when it comes to lettuces and other types of produce that we might use in an institutional setting, which I'd like to make sure people understand, institutional is basically a high volume of food in a short period of time. Okay, so It's not a negative, it's just a reality that you're serving a lot of meals in a short period of time. You need things to come through the system that are efficient, minimally processed, and clean as far as the ingredients go. So that's kind of the ethos. But we continue to work with the New York State Department of Agriculture. We sit on their board, we plan with them, we work with Cornell University, which is our land-grant university in New York State, and we continue to develop new and new initiatives in order to increase the amount of items that we're purchasing. We're menuing items on New York Thursdays. This is modeled after California, who has been doing this for about 5 years longer than us. And the whole concept here is that you're waking up the industry. You're making sure the industry realizes you're interested in New York products. Products that are either manufactured here or grown here or both. So we want to make sure that we're stimulating the economy to give our fellow citizens in New York State jobs. We want to make sure that it's a job growth kind of an opportunity. So we understand we're connected to that whole economic development, and we understand we're connected to the food system within New York State. We have a New York burger that we debuted this year, being served a couple times a month, which is fantastic. It's about 2 million servings that we launched on the first day, and we contributed basically about $1 million back into the food system by buying this New York burger. These are basically New York cattle that have been possibly dairy cattle, so they might have been producing milk, right? After their life has sort of ran out as far as their capability to produce a viable amount of milk in the milk stream, they need to go to the slaughter. So as a result, when they're going to an auction house and we're getting ready to purchase them, what we found was the meat processor that we're buying our burgers from could segregate the meat from New York State, and we could help to stimulate the fact that they could get a good price for their cattle, and that they would be shipped to a slaughterhouse basically in Pennsylvania, which I visited, saw the whole process, and segregate the meat to make sure that we're able to say that it's New York State. So once we figured all of those things out in the whole chain, we were able to launch this product. That whole process took us about 8 months to do the research and to get the product online. So many of you see our round compostable plates. This is something we're very proud of because of the fact that we're removing about 3 million foam plates from landfills. Keep in mind that this item is still being worked on as far as the way that it's processed. So when you're working with schools, many students are in the room today, you will know that some schools, there's about 700 or so schools that actually have composting pickups from the Department of Sanitation. And what they're supposed to be doing is the student, just like at Hunter, you're supposed to be segregating your trash. You're supposed to be putting your recycling in one bin, your organic matter in another, and your refuse that goes to the landfill in a third, just simply put. And what we find is that some schools do that better than others. It's a very big deal for us to get a school, especially high school students, to take the time to actually segregate their trash correctly. So we know that's a challenge. We're working really hard, but our goal as the school system was to create as much compostable waste as possible, which is why we transitioned from the styrofoam to the round compostable plate, so that you're allowing for more compostable material to be entered into that composting stream. Because this is super innovative. New York City is well ahead of every other urban city in the United States when it comes to composting. Maybe not ahead of some of the small school districts that are near farms, but definitely far ahead when you look at urban settings like Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, Dallas, and others. And so we want to make sure we're giving them as much product as possible so that it economically makes sense for a trash processor to invest in composting technology. And that's still a very growing and emerging field. So our goal is it's a renewable resource that it's made from, so it's better than petroleum because it's renewable, it's made from trees and paper pulp, and these trays are actually made in Maine, so it's an American product. So that's a good story. So on the upside, you have that piece of it. On the downside, a good portion of the plates are being diverted from landfills, and we continue to work with Department of Sanitation to get better at that. But the real trick is the students segregating their trash correctly, because if it's highly contaminated, then it can't go to the composting stream. Okay, so it's very important that we do that well. Program awareness. So how many of you have seen subway ads during the summer and in the fall? Raise your hands high. Awesome, great. About 10 years ago, you would never have seen any ads. So this is through partnership with Share Our Strength and with the New York State Education Department and through the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act that there was money that was finally put towards allowing for a targeted sort of approach to the summer meals program specifically, and also we sort of worked creatively with the team in New York State to allow us to promote the meals program into the fall, September and October and into November. So you'll see this on the subways, on the bus shelters, etc., in order to make sure that we're promoting the fact that food is available for our communities throughout the city, throughout the year. How many of you heard about breakfast in the classroom? Okay, and how many of you, as far as students, do any of the students have breakfast in the classroom in their schools? No, okay. So it might be coming. So I know you're in high school, right? Yeah. So it might be coming to you. Right now, it rolled out in elementary schools. So it was a mayoral initiative to make sure that we rolled out breakfast in the classrooms in all elementary schools. And when we say elementary schools, we say pre-K through 5th grade, buildings that just had that population, not a building that had kindergarten through 12th grade. So it had to be a standalone elementary school that we rolled out. And we basically have it over a 3-year period, so we're in year 2, and next year is our last year for that first phase. The mayor has expressed interest in breakfast in the classroom rolling out to those cohabitated buildings next year. So we are going to have a whole nother phase 2 to this project, where we're going to roll it out into schools that might be K to 8, for example. So that at least in the buildings that aren't isolated, the elementary schools will now have access to this meal. And this is really an equalizer. This is really allowing for every student to start their day with a healthy and nutritious breakfast so they're academically ready to learn. What we've noticed over the years, and I'm sure it will come up in some of the panel discussion, is that the teachers really embrace it because it's an opportunity to use the food as a teaching tool. So they might talk about history, they might talk about math, they might have the students divide their meal up and talk about fractions, etc. So teachers are becoming very engaged in the way that this is being delivered. Initially, it was a big shock to them. Oh my God, you're taking 15 minutes away from my elementary school day. I can't afford to give it up. It's going to create garbage in the classroom, so on and so forth. We've gotten well past all of those concerns, and now it's becoming a real integrated approach to the learning day. We're very proud of. We are partnered with other school districts. So just to remind everyone in the group that the Urban School Food Alliance is a standalone 501c3, a nonprofit, and we're partnered with large urban school districts. There's 7 members currently, New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, Dallas, Orlando, and Fort Lauderdale. And really, we're trying to create leverage in the marketplace to drive the price of foods down and the quality up. So can you imagine if we're coming together, which we did on the compostable plate, to purchase a product, you're going to drive the price down to a place where it's a value to the city and the state that's involved. So we were able to show some traction with doing that on the compostable plate. Right now, today, we have a compostable utensil bid open. So we're in the process of bidding for a compostable utensil. And we're working on food items as well. So working on initiatives towards procuring food together that would toe the line and improve the quality of food offered to students. So we're doing procurements together, we're sharing best practices, and we're making sure our voice is unified. So we heard from the Secretary of Agriculture a few weeks ago that there was some loosening of the standards for the nutrition standards that were on the school meals program. The Urban School Food Alliance came out in support of the existing standards. And the fact that we understand other school districts may have challenges, but overall, we've come this far, we need to continue to sort of move in this direction. And as the large school districts, we know we're looked to for advice and support to many smaller school districts that may not have the wherewithal to make it happen. So maximizing the value, serving high quality food, and improving the environment are basically our goals. This was the specific example, the case study with the compostable plate. Polystyrene tray was about 3 cents. Pre-bid, before we brought together, it was about 15 to 12 cents for a compostable plate, and we were able to bring it down to 5 cents. That made it a value for school districts to purchase and make the conversion for so many reasons. We also we worked with the Parsons New School and some of our community-based organizations to actually design a round plate. Does anyone eat off a rectangular plate at home? Okay, we all eat off of round plates. Now, we started with maybe we'll just serve off a round plate. But we are serving students, and especially elementary students. 80% of our participation is basically elementary students. So when you're talking to those students, right, what do you think their number 1 complaint is on a flat plate? Go ahead.
That food touches.
Right. So we heard that loud and clear. Students told us when we were doing piloting of this that they do not want their food to touch. Okay, that is still true. So we did have to create some raised compartments. And so we had to actually engineer this before we went out for the bid. And so we worked with Parsons New School. We had the design students actually press and mold samples of products. We actually tested them with some students in New York City and developed this specification through that partnership. Okay, because we can't do this alone. We need to work together. So it's a nice rigid product. It works really quite well. There was definitely some transition. People were seeing it sweat. For example, when you put it down, it's not leaking through, but if it's a hot item, it breathes because it's a natural product. So you'll have some steam that occurs on the table. It's not that the liquid sauce or the liquid is actually going through the product, it's just that it's sweating. It's perspiring, basically. So there were a lot of interesting things that we learned. This was our first procurement, and we'll be going out for a new compostable procurement in about 1.5 years. So we're going to take the lessons we learned and just continue to get better with each one. Our procurements typically are about 5 years long. We also, rather than going down the procurement aspect where we're actually buying together, we can also set a standard. So we can say as the Urban School Food Alliance, we're going to all embed a standard in all of our contracts when it comes to chicken as an example. So we worked with School Food Focus, we worked with Pew Charitable Trust, we worked with Natural Resources Defense Council, because they were really the leaders on antibiotic standards and research, etc. But we said, how can we kind of tow this over the finish line, accomplishing the goals that everybody else had in mind, which was to really reduce the use of antibiotics in livestock. And so we stepped out and made this statement so that we would be able to have no antibiotics in the chicken that we're serving in our school systems. And so the way this works is we all say, we're going to agree to this standard, and as you contract for your chicken products, you put that standard in your contract. We're not saying that you have to buy it together. Okay, so this was another way of sort of making a large initiative come to reality. We are, from the policy side of things, there's 3 basic asks on our website that we're looking for in CNR reauthorization. It's held up, as you all know, and so we continue to ask for more commodity dollars, expanding the opportunity to feed in unsupervised locations, like a grab-and-go situation during the summer so students can take their meal with them. And also we want to really make the school meals program part of the instructional day. So breakfast in the classroom was the first sort of step in that, but it would be wonderful. I dream about the day when School Foods is actually no longer called School Foods. When you come to the dining room and you're getting your foods class, and in that foods class, you're experiencing lunch as part of it, but there's an actual educator in front of the students talking to them about where the food comes from, connecting it to all of their other lessons that they're learning throughout the day and the month, and trying to really incorporate the positive side of our American food system. There's a lot of tension going on in the American food system today, and I think we should stand very tall and very proud of the food that our agricultural industry is providing for us, what our farmers are doing, and all of the wonderful things that our manufacturers are doing to make sure that they're being good custodians in this space of high productivity, people expecting to eat very fast. I think you all understand that America values productivity way before they value social, sort of taking time out and sitting down and eating a meal together for an hour, right? I mean, how many of you have actually taken an hour to eat lunch? No one. Maybe 1 or 2, right? So it doesn't happen because, it's not because as a nutritionist or as a chef, you don't want to, but the culture doesn't promote it. It's not an American value. An American value, number 1, is productivity. What did I accomplish today, and what did I do to contribute to my neighbor, to my community, okay? So if that's what's always going on against you, you're not going to feel comfortable taking a whole hour to actually savor every bite, to talk about what you're eating and why you're eating it. So my dream would be for that to at least happen in a controlled environment in the schools. That will take a lot of investment. That'll take, the school day possibly being a little longer. That'll take more teachers. It'll take a whole paradigm shift in the way we think about things. But think about the outcomes that could provide. That could provide great outcomes for, sensitivity to our American food culture, to the way that we think about our neighbors, to the understanding that our food matters, and also looking for the highest quality food for the rest of our lives as consumers. So we'll see if that all happens, but that's one of our asks. It's a big one, and we know it's a big one, but we need to put it out there, otherwise we're not going to strive for it. So that gives you a little peek behind the curtain of the world of school food.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. That was great. If the panelists can come up, that would be wonderful. So Simone wasn't singled out. She's joining us. She was here, and she's been here for every event we've had with School Foods, and always been a participant. And one of our guests couldn't come today, so she's replacing. There we go. So if we could just start with having you introduce yourself and let us know what your role is, and then Simone as well.
Good morning, everyone. My name is George Angelakis. I work for School Food for the past 20 years. In the past 6 years, in the capacity of a district supervisor in District 3 in Manhattan, which is the Upper West Side. Runs from 61st Street all the way up to 122nd Street, just to give you an idea of the geography, where exactly I'm at. My office actually is not so far from here. It's on 111th Street in Lenox. As I said, supervisor for the last 6 years, but I've been with School Food for almost 20, so I worked in many capacities. I started from the kitchen and worked my way up while going to school. Received an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and for the past 7 years in the afternoon I teach as an adjunct professor at LaGuardia Community College for the Department of Health Sciences, and I teach courses that you're all familiar with, food service and nutrition. So that's a little bit of information about me and what I do and what I'm all about.
Thank you.
My name is Simone Martin. I'm the Recruitment Director for the organization. Basically, I'm part of operations, and I support supervisors like Georgia. We have approximately 397 school food service managers, and it's always an open door position where we're consistently replacing managers all of the time. Not in a bad way, but when you have such a large number, people are retiring, people are getting promoted. People are transitioning into other roles, so it's one of those particular positions where we're always in need of really good managers. A little bit about myself. I've been with the organization 18 years. I started out as a school food service manager, transitioned to training supervisor, training director, and now recruitment director. I work with a lot of community-based organizations as well as other initiatives within the DOE, such as CTE, which is the Career Technical Education intern students, with their high school students. My department, we also work with some other, colleges, Hunter College as well as Brooklyn College, and we have a really robust internship program.
Thank you. And also, just something to note that you've also been with School Foods, I think, 25 years?
26.
26. If you go in and work there, you're not leaving. So I guess...
Well, it does become a passion awfully quickly, which, maybe many of you have had interactions with our supervisors or managers or some of the cooks even on the serving lines, and they know you by name. And they know their students, and they really are trying hard to be passionate about the work. And so it kind of gets in your blood, and once you're in it to win it.
And I did a little bit of, not academic or scholarly research. I did ask my daughter, who's in middle school, about School Foods. And I'm sure most of you know that in New York City, middle school School Foods is free. And her discussion with me has changed in the last 2 years, and I think I shared this with Stephen, that she said, no, I would never eat that, eating School Foods. And now, yesterday, she said, oh, we're all starting to eat it, which I thought was huge progress, even though it's one anecdotal story, and all our friends eat it. And the fact that it's free was her number one reason why students are considering it, and also because of the salad bar. So I thought that was even though it's one anecdotal story, shows, you know, a lot of the progress that you've achieved. The first question I have is, what are the greatest roadblocks that New York City and DOE faces in serving healthy lunches, you know, to students and all of your years of being there? And how do you think that they should be addressed?
I think in the presentation we talked about some of those roadblocks. So perception is a big one. So either it's the perception of the students, the teachers, or the community, or your daughter. And so that's something we hear all the time. We're still the butt of American culture as far as jokes go. You know, you'll still see a skit about, you know, the lunch lady and sort of either the rudeness or the poor quality of the food, etc. And so we're constantly up against that perception. So I would say that's number one, including in your local school. And where it plays out for the local school is primarily in the teachers. So the teachers are the people that students really look up to day in and day out. If the teacher says to the student who comes up after lunch and says the food was nasty, oh yeah, I would never eat that too, what do you think is going to happen? You know, that student's not going to model, that student's going to think that their point is valid, and that they're going to continue to behave in the way that maybe they're not going to try school lunch. And so the teachers are a very important role model and very important in that sort of perception at the school level. On a larger scale, I think that we do have major problems with our food supply as an industry. You know, there's things that go on when it has to do with the scale and the volume that we're serving day in and day out. And you look at trying to maximize those relationships and make sure we have clean labels and good quality products coming in that are minimally processed. That presents a whole set of challenges for us. But more importantly, it also creates a situation where we should be doing the best we can possibly do, but we have this limited amount of money. So if we were to able to invest a little bit more money towards the food, let's say an additional 30 cents, it would be revolutionary in what we could achieve. For example, we might be able to go away from a chopped and formed breaded chicken patty to a grilled chicken breast. Or we could serve, for example, instead of serving a juicing orange that, you know, is very difficult to peel and has seeds, we could go to serving a navel orange. Okay, so those types of things would be monumental from a culinary perspective when you're looking at the way we're offering our program. We could take it to another level. We do really great work with the limited resources we have, but I would say that's a major part of the constraint, is also accessing the next level of food.
Thank you.
I don't know, George, if you
Oh, no, pretty much, yes. We have roadblocks, but what we are, school food, we learn to overcome. Any challenges, I mean, we are unique in our setting, but we work very well together. I mean, even though we're a large organization, we're part of a team, and we do overcome any challenge that comes our way. Make it work.
And in terms of control on the individual school level, I guess my impression is that principals have a significant amount of control over what's served in their schools. Am I under the wrong impression? Do they have options? Well, tell us, because I know that you have all vegetarian schools and so forth, and you have different religious food issues that you have to overcome. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, the principals, we do hear people when they come to us. We do work well with people. We have those relationships. However, don't forget that, you know, under the USDA guidelines, we do develop our menus, and we have to follow them. We can do changes that do not agree with the guidelines that we're under. So, with that said, there are the menus that we follow. There are choices that the principals have. So if you're not happy with the regular menu, there's alternatives. We do have the alternative menu in my district. There's more than half of the schools, we follow that.
Can you tell us about the alternative menu?
Yes, it's mainly less actually, less processed foods. That's what it is. So you won't see breaded chicken in that menu, and things like mozzarella sticks and products like that. So you will see vegetarian chili, you will see other options. So the principals do have choices. I'm sure they take the parents' recommendations under thought, and they decide that this is the menu I would like my school to follow. However, with that said, that menu has to be followed. We can't just make changes. Okay, can this day, I don't want the chili, I want this product. We don't make changes like that because then we kind of step away from the USDA guidelines, and we can do that. But we do communicate, we take everything under consideration. Any comments, it's passed on to our food menu management and our central offices, and the development goes from there.
So I will add to that shift doesn't happen quickly. So because we're so big, even if a principal decides they'd like to shift from an alternative menu to a vegetarian menu, all posted on our website, all public for people to see. But if you wanted to make that shift, it's usually about a 1-month process because orders have to convert. We have to plan ahead. Our distributors and everyone else are expecting that school to order against a particular menu. So we have to make the transition. That takes about a month. Then we ask if you do transition to a menu, you give it at least a month. So they have to at least commit to a month or two of using that new menu because most students aren't going to like something the first time they taste it. We know that. We know it as adults. Typically it takes you 7 to 10 exposures to something to actually decide, I really don't like it or I really do like it, okay? So we want them to have some traction and some time with that menu. And then it takes about a month to convert them off of it if they decide to go back to the classical menu. So it's a commitment that the community has to make, not only the principal. So the principal has it, and as Georgia mentioned, the parents and the students, we want to make sure that the whole community is behind it because it's such a monumental shift.
Is there a monumental cost to in shifting?
No, the menu costs are basically the same as the true classical menu. So the costs aren't different because the requirements are the same. So you still have to serve the same portions of vegetables, the same portions of meat.
I meant the actual shifting of
No,
menu.
there's not really a cost because again, the labor is the same. The setup as far as the way that we're doing our work is the same. So there's not a cost to shifting to the menus. And one last thing is, when you look at our menus and you see any time that it says assorted, that's where there's a lot of autonomy at the school level. So the manager and the cook can decide what type of fresh food to put out. They can decide what types of things could be added to the salad bar. So there is some local customization that still can happen even in this highly centralized program.
And then in terms of when there is a shift, let's say to an all-vegetarian menu or a 5-day-a-week, 5-day-a-week vegetarian menu, you said that there's no budget for any kind of promotion, but is there any, have there been examples of education combined with these shifts?
That's a good question. So that's where our CBO partners, our community-based organizations, and our NGO partners come in. So for example, if a school's going towards a vegetarian menu, we have the New York Coalition for Healthy School Food, which is a New York State-based program, who really helps to support that transition. So they'll do parent dinner nights where they'll expose parents to the different recipes that we're going to serve. They'll give student taste testings to students and coordinate that so that before the student is going to see the vegetarian chili on the menu, maybe a day or two prior, we'll do a sampling so the student's familiar with what that menu item is. Because remember, about 75 to 80% of our students qualify for a free or reduced meal. So this might be their only exposure to a really healthy and nutritious meal service at breakfast and lunch. It's a big risk for a student to try something new. If they're coming through the line and they're expecting to get chicken tenders, for example, and all of a sudden the menu's changed and we're serving vegetarian chili as an extra choice, right, in addition to the tenders, do you think the student's going to voluntarily switch out the product they like and know they're going to eat for something innovative and new? That's maybe 1 or 2 students will be that risk taker, because that's just in their nature, but that's not the norm. So making that transition is also a very big risk for students to make when they're giving up their one meal. Okay, so you gotta understand, that's why the taste testing is so important. That's why we want to partner with organizations to do the taste testing.
And is that the partnering with organizations, is that something that is sort of systematic or is it more ad hoc and kind of, if an organization comes to you, you'll sort of try to include them, or you
It's
try
pretty
to coordinate
systematic.
that?
So
Yeah.
I gave one example. Another example is Wellness in the Schools, who works very hard at programming. So you asked about education. They'll do education in the classroom to expose the students to some recipe development and planning to particular ingredients so that they understand what butternut squash ravioli might be, or what a particular salad bar recipe for a healthy coleslaw would taste like. They can make it in the classroom and have a discussion about it. So they're supporting it in that way. Systematically, and Georgia could speak to this, but if the principal was to say, I want to go to the vegetarian menu, we would typically put them in touch with New York Coalition for Healthy School Food and have our own conversations with them about the resources that may be available to them to partner.
So, thank you. So we talked about stigma, and that's a big problem, I think, and you slowly, I guess, chip away at it, and I'm sure that there's probably the marketing like that you try to insert, like for summer meals, you can sort of push things out there just to promote Feed Your Mind and so forth. But given no budget, assuming there's no budget, what are some other ways that you can kind of reduce stigma? And is universal free meals, is that the answer basically? Or it's a combination thereof, or what are your thoughts?
And I would just add, as you start, to think about the years that we've been working on this. So, very long time ago, breakfast became free for everyone. Then it was breakfast in the classroom. Now it was universal meals prior to all of that. Now it's CEP, community eligibility provision. So there's this whole movement happening on a national level that we're part of, and I'll let Georgia speak to the specifics, but this is not a new continuum. We know that there's a tried and true success when you remove the stigma associated with the economic side of it.
Of course, it does make a difference when all students receive free meals as opposed to categorizing based on the eligibility and the family income. And that's what we're going towards. So hopefully by next year, we just found out that we'll have more schools that will qualify for free lunches. And the goal is to get there to have all students eat for free lunch as they do for breakfast. It does make a big difference, and that will alleviate that issue. So we won't see the problem of people getting online to receive the lunch and being identified. Even though we do have the POS system that we use on the line, I mean, it doesn't really identify the students. It does, but you don't actually see it. But free lunch for everyone, that's our goal. And hopefully we'll get there sooner rather than later. I mean, every year we're making progress.
In terms of planning new menus and coming up with new menu items, you have an extensive process that you go through before let's say I came up with a food idea and I wanted School Foods to carry it. Could you talk briefly about what that process is?
It's difficult. So when you think about the process itself, we have very high quality standards, and you might have recently seen some issues regarding quality in the school meals program. When you're serving 1 million meals a day, something's going to go wrong. But generally speaking, when you look at our program, it's exemplary. We do a very, very good job at making sure that we're getting high quality foods into our system. And that starts with the beginning of the process. So it starts with a manufacturer, a broker, a food show, an idea from a home recipe. It could be any of the above that start the process towards ending up on our menu. So once you have the concept, you know what you're going after, you might ask the industry and say, does anyone have a super duper 3-cheese sandwich, as a simple example, right? The industry may respond and say, yes, we have, hundreds of these types of sandwich combinations. What kind of cheese would you like? And you go through Munster, mozzarella, cheddar, American, whatever it may be. And there might be all these different versions presented to us. That's when the students will come in, where we'll taste all different types, if it's a manufactured item. If it's something that we're making ourselves, we might make the recipes ourselves with our chefs, make the cheese sandwich ourselves and test it with students first before we ask industry to make it on a large scale. So that takes months. Then when you get to the point where you know the recipe, you know what you'd like, then it goes to getting samples in, making sure it meets all of the nutritional requirements, that it doesn't have any high fructose corn syrup in the bread, that the sodium in the cheese is low, Now you're getting into the technical development. That takes months. Then you end up, we're in a situation where, okay, we have the product, we really like it, we'd like to add it to our contracts. So we have a distribution contract right now where it is a line item bid every 5 years, and the distributor gives us a quote on that price at the time of the first year. And there's increases that are allowed once a year through PPI indexes that the federal government publishes. So when you commit to that price in your bid, you have to hold that price for 5 years with these small index increases once a year, okay? So we evaluate, we award the bid to the distributors, and then that list is live for the next 5 years. But it's food. Trends change in 5 years. You need to have the opportunity to innovate along the life of that contract. So the way that we innovate is we allow for items to be deactivated from the contract, and we allow for items to be activated into the contract. But we have to do almost a mini procurement as we add new items to the contract. So that's where we have to do an ask to the industry. We have to make sure everyone had a chance to submit and compete on getting that new product placement on the distribution contract. That takes about 6 months. Then once we get all that done, now we're about into it for 9 months, let's say. Now we're ready to add it to the contract. We have to go through a contracts office who has to review all of the documentation to make sure we did everything correctly and that we didn't have any favoritism, there was no relationships that shouldn't be, et cetera, which is all good. Remember, we're spending taxpayers' dollars, so I'm okay with this. We want to make sure it's being tested and tried and questioned along the way. So eventually they say, okay, all the seals of approval have been met, everything is acceptable, you can add it to contract. That's maybe 12 to 18 months after we've had the concept. So you can imagine how difficult that is to a chef, somebody who just really likes to work with food, have something that tastes good, I have a great idea, now I'm ready to go with it. It takes me 1.5 years to actually get it on the menu. And once it's on the menu, it might be off trend. It might not be on trend anymore. For example, sriracha was a big spice and flavoring for the past 9 months, I would say. We work with our suppliers and with our partners to understand the trends because they have marketing capabilities, they're doing investments in research, et cetera, and trends. So we do talk to them and they share reports with us, which is why we were on trend with sriracha chicken sliders in New York City schools, the same time that Wendy's and other quick serve restaurants were serving it, because we were partnered with our partners to make sure we were on trend with that well in advance. If we didn't do that 1.5 years ago, we would have missed the mark. We would be coming out with, which is typically the case, coming out with things after it's been on trend.
And the one other thing is which I've learned through my working with School Foods, is you might go down this whole process and then the supplier might not be able to supply the amounts you need.
We try to make sure that that's not the case on the upfront side of it, but things do trip up occasionally. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to open I have lots of questions, but I'll have next year too to ask them. So I'll open it up to...
Thanks for the invitation next year, that's great.
Well, thanks to Simone, we've been doing this every year, and this is our largest audience yet, and Simone had approached us, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, and started out in a small classroom, and now it's sort of growing each year. So I'll open it up. Does someone have a question?
I do. Hi, thanks a lot for doing this, and for all the innovations you've managed to put forward. I'm here today as both an advocate. I have a degree in food policy, and also as a parent of a kindergartner who loves school food. I have some issues. His school happens to have done the alternative menu and then since gone back to the traditional menu, I think mainly driven by a group of really active 5th graders who were not as keen on it. But we have the menu up in our kitchen. My son likes to look at it every day. And one thing jumped out at me this morning actually, which is that next week, Tuesday you've got a 100% beef cheeseburger, Wednesday you've got bite-sized beef tacos, and Thursday you've got a steak and cheese empanada. And I'm just that struck me as somewhat odd, and I wondered, I didn't think it was an oversight, but I wondered if you could speak to what kinds of, what's behind that, what kinds of challenges, whether it's an issue of the commodities situation that you were talking about. So yeah.
It could be all of the above.
Okay.
So from a culinary perspective, why would we serve 3 beef items back to back is the question. And so that doesn't make sense, just bluntly answering. But then when you look at the way we develop our menus, there probably are other reasons. So I don't know the exact circumstance, I don't want to claim that I know it, but I can assume a few things, being in the role and doing planning for many years. It might have to do with commodities, that we do have beef that we need to utilize before the end of the year, so it could be that. It could be that we had to make a menu change in the sense that, you know, we might not have had a chicken item available to us through some recent supply chain issues, and as a result we had to substitute in another beef item in its place because it was something that we knew students would still participate and enjoy. So it's probably one of those two reasons, not so much that it was that intentional to serve 3 beef items back to back, to be honest. At the same time, you can rest assured that from a nutritional point of view, they're getting similar nutrients throughout the 5 days. So when you're thinking about the calories, the saturated fat, you're thinking about the overall outcome during the 5 days, it's balancing out because it has to. We can't just arbitrarily make the change anyway. And finally, there is some choice. So we are offering cold sandwiches, we're offering a hummus or a turkey sandwich depending on the day of the week in our elementary schools. And so there's some other choices built into that it's not only the hot item that the student has to select. So.
If I may, we also offer the very popular grilled cheese sandwich that those kids love on a daily basis.
And finally, from the nutritional hat, all of our items have whole grain breading. You know, even the classical items are the best version of those classical items that they can be. You know, so when you talk about a burger and it's 100% beef and not blended with soy and other additives, you know, when you talk about the chicken tenders or the chicken bites, or you talk about the empanadas, etc., you know, they're very clean, good quality items. I wrestle, just as you probably wrestle, with the learnings you're giving your child in the sense of, well, it's good for you to eat pizza every day. It's good for you to eat a burger every day. It's good for you to eat a chicken tender every day. So I do understand that, which is why in the presentation I started out with that sort of understanding or a little bit of a reframing of American food culture, because it's important to understand we're trying to have the student come to the line. Because the bottom line is if they come up and get the chicken tender, it's a good version of it. I know we have to put that lesson aside, but I'm very happy to see students self-selecting from the salad bar along with that chicken tender, getting a piece of fresh fruit, getting a fat-free milk, so on and so forth. So there's other nutrition that I'm happy I'm motivating them to come get, is another way to look at it. Might be misguided, but that's the reality of where we are.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jasmine from CMS 367. I'm working with the program CUP, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is it possible to have more seasonal food on the menu?
Very good question. I would say that yes, it's possible. We are working towards having more seasonal items, so you'll see, especially fruits is easy to do. During the summer months, you'll see peaches, you'll see melons, and a lot of those are locally sourced as well, which is great. So they're coming from New York State. If not from the state, they're coming from the region, which is really great. So the answer is yes. Because of our supply and demand issues, because of the fact that we're so big, it's hard to get the seasonal items on the scale that we need, all coming from local. But we still want to make sure that it's a seasonal sort of approach to the menu. You'll typically see it in the vegetables and the fruit more than you'll see it in some of the entrees and the recipes. Good question.
Hi, I'm Maria, and I'm from the CUP program as well. And how many schools in New York are on the alternative menu? Is there a success overall, and where are they located?
It should be, I believe, anywhere from 120 to 140. I can speak for my district in particular. I have 11 schools on the alternative menu. 9 of them are partnership with Wellness in the Schools. The other 2, the principal just thought it was a good idea to switch to the alternative menu, and since it's a menu that School Food developed, if everybody's in agreement, we provide it for them.
Are more schools moving over to the alternative food menu?
That has been the trend. That has been the trend. If I could tell you that for the past 6 years that I've been in Manhattan in District 3, we almost doubled in size as far as the alternative menu. This is something that I used to be. Before I came here, I used to be an assistant supervisor in the district in Queens. And I have never heard of the alternative menu or Wellness in the School before that. So that was something new to me, but it was embraced. I personally enjoy it very much. I love the recipes. The kids in the beginning, they're a little reluctant to try new things, but it works very well, and all students do enjoy it.
We had a highly centralized, but we still do have a highly centralized menu planning process because you want to make sure you're maximizing the supply chain, right? So you want to order as much of the same item as possible to get the best possible price. You also want to make sure that you're getting the product through supply so that, you know, they're manufacturing it on time and showing up in our distribution and in our schools to support that menu, right? So imagine if we had 2,000 menus. What would that look like? Would that be efficient? No. So this was something that was done over the last 10 years to become highly centralized. Also, the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act required us to follow very strictly the centralized menu, not to allow for autonomy. And so as a result of that, we needed to make sure we were hitting those nutritional targets and make it very centralized. But we also realized we needed to provide some choice, which is why we created the alternative menu and the vegetarian menu. But as Georgia mentioned, you have to follow the whole menu. You can't swap out a day here or a day there on any of our menus because of that highly centralized approach.
And if I may add, another thing is and this is particular to Manhattan, there's multiple schools in one building. I mean, to give you an example, my district has 67 schools in 26 buildings, which means one building, one kitchen can cater to anywhere from 2 to 3 or 4 schools, or even more. So with that said, when the transition is made from one menu to the next, everyone must be in agreement because we have one kitchen and we will be preparing one type of menu. Therefore, all the principals, they have to meet with the parents, they have to make a decision, a uniform decision for everyone to agree that this is what we're going by. And again, if it doesn't work out and somebody's not happy, they can have the meetings, and we don't dictate to them what to do. So they have the meetings. If they decide to stay with it, they will. If not, they could always go back, as long as we have that about a month to 6 weeks notice, so we can, change our ordering and from that aspect make those changes.
Hi, so I work for a nonprofit that goes into a couple schools in the Bronx and teaches fitness and nutrition, and part of my job is to oversee their lunch and promote the healthy foods. So I've noticed in a couple of different schools, like some of the schools, the principal has opted out of chocolate milk and they only serve the white fat-free milk, and then other schools it's still an option. So I was wondering, like, how possible is it to get chocolate milk, like, out of the schools, and like what's preventing it?
So we do offer chocolate milk is one of the choices of the milk, the fat-free chocolate milk in all our schools. Now, if a principal decides that they don't want the chocolate milk, all they have to do is give us a letter, they put it in writing, and we change our ordering. We are mandated by federal guidelines to provide 2 choices on the milk, the 1% and the fat-free. Now, we give 3 choices, but as long as we give the 2, we are clear as far as the federal government and the reimbursement aspect of it. So therefore, if a school does not want the chocolate milk, all they have to do is ask, and we will accommodate. However, for a principal to make it, and it has to come from the principal, for a principal to make that decision, of course they have to meet with the parents first and see what the consensus is. Again, the chocolate milk that we do offer in the schools, it's fat-free. There's no high fructose corn syrup in it. So yes, it's not a bad choice, as some people may view it. But we also have the other 2 choices, the 1% and the zero-fat white milk. So that would, kind of cover us as far as the federal government guidelines.
And the federal government guidelines could change. It could have mandate soda for certain free.
Oh, yes.
We don't know.
We don't know what's coming in the future, yes.
But we are fortunate that in New York City, there's a lot of attention, as this room is showing, on food issues and on food policy and on food standards. And so I don't foresee us getting away from New York City's food standards. So
We're not going to let them serve soda.
It wasn't that long ago that it was allowed, actually, as an additional beverage. Not that we ever did it, but it was allowed.
It was in vending machines a while back.
And non-public schools had fountains.
Non-public schools.
Hi, I'm a student at Hunter College. That was actually one of my questions with the new administration. Is that a worry that we're going to kind of backtrack in the progress that we've made so far?
So everyone's view of progress is different. So it depends on who you're talking to, so keep that in mind, right? So depends on who it is, you know, so to industry, it might be progress to serve soda in the meals program. I think from our perspective at School Food and also our perspective larger as the Urban School Food Alliance, I could speak to both. I think we feel, as I mentioned before, that the standards that were put forward in the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act were correct, and it was a good step in the right direction, and we'd like to see those continue, and then to build on those successes. So I don't think we're looking for it to go backwards. I don't think the city is looking for it to go backwards. And that's why I think it's very important that everyone in the room stays engaged and in touch with what's being discussed or even proposed, and that you're vocal about that as you go forward within your groups, to make sure that people realize that it can be done, it is being done, and we shouldn't be listening maybe to the rhetoric, we should be looking at the facts.
And we have a last question, just because we have to stick to time.
Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Eric Lockley. I'm a writer, filmmaker, and producer, and I have a show about health and nutrition and fitness and urban communities, and I'm curious, you said perception is one of the biggest roadblocks. So do you all have any either funds or work with any nonprofits that can bring storytellers to schools or to create jingles for, for school foods? What is your relationship, I guess, to performing artists in a way to kind of challenge the perceptions?
Let's talk afterwards. We haven't explored a lot. We do have some performing arts that do work with us. Over the years, we've had some people that have worked with us on jingles and on particular events in the dining room, so music in the dining room at the same time. But I would love to talk about it even further. We can always build on maybe your successes, which is great.
So I know there's a lot more questions, but again, I have a commitment to end at 10:15 for our guests and for our panelists. I want to thank our panelists. You, as always, it's wonderful to see you. And Simone, thank you for organizing. And if anybody has any questions about recruitment, School Foods is a great place to work, and Simone is your contact. And for internships, I'm trying to give you a plug, but you always work so well, you didn't get to say so as much. And thank you, Stephen and Georgia, for coming. Also, make sure to check out NYC, I have to do a plug for us, nycfoodpolicy.org. Make sure you sign up for our weekly news digest, which we put out every week, which seems to be helping the food policy and food practice community. We go through every single news article that exists for the week, and we make sure that you see a digest of it every that comes to your inbox for free. And we do 3 to 4 original stories each week. The next event we're going to have is on June 6th on why regional farms are important to New York City residents and why they should care. And also look for the center. We do a 40 under 40, and I think there's a couple people in the audience who are related to our 40 under 40, including one of the chaperones of this group of students. So I want you to look for that coming out in the next week. And thank you again for a wonderful discussion, as always, and we look forward to hearing more from School Foods and the wonderful things you're trying to do and getting universal foods for everybody.
Thank you for all your support.